She appeared at his door, a ghost in the moonlight, bruised and barefoot, with a secret blooming beneath her tattered dress. He was a cowboy, as unyielding as the land he worked. But the moment his eyes met hers, he knew his solitary life was about to shatter. He offered her shelter, a quiet haven from the storm she ran from, but what he found in her brave, broken spirit was a connection deeper than any he'd ever known. He just didn't realize how far he'd have to go, or what battles he'd have to fight, to protect the promise of forever. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The wind, a relentless sculptor of the high plains, whipped around Caleb Danner's small, sturdy cabin, carrying the scent of pine and distant rain. Inside, the crackle of the fireplace offered little comfort against the encroaching chill of a late autumn evening. Caleb, his large hands calloused from years of working the land, was meticulously oiling his saddle, the leather smelling of honest labor and horse sweat. His life was one of quiet solitude, a rhythm dictated by the demands of his ranch, the rising and setting of the sun, and the unwavering loyalty of his horse, Dusty. He was a man of few words, his dark eyes holding a depth of experience that hinted at a past he rarely spoke of, a past that had taught him early on what evil looked like. A sudden, insistent pounding on his cabin door shattered the stillness, an unexpected intrusion into his peaceful routine. He rarely received visitors, especially not at this hour, and a prickle of unease, a survival instinct honed over years, tightened in his gut. He reached for the rifle leaning against the hearth, its familiar weight a cold comfort in his hand, before slowly approaching the door. He pulled it open, cautiously, just a crack, and in the sliver of moonlight that pierced the darkness, he saw her. She was a silhouette against the vast, unforgetting landscape, her form fragile, almost ethereal. But as the door opened wider, the flickering firelight spilled out, illuminating her face, and his breath hitched. Her eyes, wide and luminous, even in the dim light, were the color of a stormy sky, holding a desperate plea he instinctively understood. Her cheek was swollen and discolored, a vivid bruise marring the delicate curve of her jaw. Her dress, thin and torn, offered little protection against the biting wind, and her bare feet, caked with mud, bore silent witness to a desperate flight. And then he saw it, the subtle curve beneath her dress, the undeniable swell of a woman heavy with child. "Please," she whispered, her voice a mere tremor on the wind. "Please, help me." Caleb didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. The raw fear in her eyes, the stark vulnerability of her battered form, spoke volumes. He had seen evil before, in different forms, and he recognized its brutal handiwork. This woman was running from something truly terrible, and she was utterly alone. He didn't hesitate. His instincts, forged in a life lived on the edge of civilization, screamed that she needed shelter, and she needed it now. He stepped aside, his large frame filling the doorway, and gestured her in with a silent nod. "Come in," he rumbled, his voice deeper than he intended, rough from disuse. "You're safe here." She stumbled across the threshold, collapsing onto his worn rug by the fireplace, shivering uncontrollably. Her exhaustion was palpable, a heavy cloak she wore. Caleb moved quickly, instinctively. He knelt beside her, his gaze assessing the damage. The bruise on her face was ugly, but he saw no open wounds. Her skin was cold to the touch. "I'm Sophie," she managed to whisper, her gaze fixed on the dancing flames, as if drawing warmth and courage from them. "Sophie Reynolds." "Caleb Danner," he replied, his voice softer now, devoid of its earlier roughness. He fetched a thick wool blanket from his cot, wrapping it gently around her shivering shoulders. Then, he poured her a mug of hot coffee, strong and black, the steam rising in the chill air. "Drink this. It'll warm you." She took the mug with trembling hands, her fingers brushing his. The brief touch sent a jolt through him, an unexpected spark in the quiet solitude of his cabin. She drank slowly, gratefully, the warmth seeping into her chilled bones. He observed her in silence, his gaze lingering on the subtle curve of her belly. He knew what he was taking on. A woman, pregnant and alone, running from a violent past. It was a complication he hadn't bargained for, a challenge far beyond mending fences or wrangling cattle. But looking at her, seeing the fragile strength in her storm-colored eyes, a primal urge to protect stirred within him, a feeling as old and vast as the plains themselves. He had always been a man of his word, and he had offered her safety. He would see it through. As the warmth of the coffee and the fire began to take hold, some of the tension eased from Sophie's shoulders. She looked up at him, her gaze direct, albeit still wary. "Thank you, Caleb. I don't know what I would have done." "No need for thanks," he said, his voice gruff, uncomfortable with overt gratitude. "You needed help. I had a warm place. It's simple as that." But it wasn't simple. Nothing about her appearance was simple. He knew that the man who had done this to her would come looking, and when he did, Caleb Danner would be ready. He had offered shelter, but he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that this was just the beginning. And he realized, with a surprising clarity, that falling for her strength, her kindness, and the way she smiled through the pain might be the biggest surprise of all. The quiet rhythm of Caleb's solitary life was irrevocably altered with Sophie's arrival. The cabin, once a haven of his own making, now hummed with a different kind of life, a delicate balance of shared space and unspoken understandings. Sophie, though still fragile from her ordeal, possessed an inner fortitude that amazed him. She moved with a quiet grace, her hands, despite their cuts and bruises, finding purpose in his simple home. She insisted on helping with chores, folding clothes, kneading dough for bread, her movements slow but determined. Caleb often found himself watching her, a profound sense of respect blossoming within him for her quiet resilience. Her past remained largely unspoken in the first few days, a silent agreement between them. He knew she was running from a cruel husband, a man named Silas Reynolds, a name that had surfaced in brief, hushed whispers she uttered in her sleep. Caleb's own experiences with hardship, his innate ability to discern truth from falsehood, told him she spoke no lies, that her fear was justified. He knew what evil looked like, and he instinctively understood the desperate flight of an innocent woman caught in its cruel grip. He had always been a man who valued his solitude, who kept his heart guarded after the bitter lessons of his own youth. But Sophie's presence, gentle and uncomplaining, slowly chipped away at his formidable defenses. He found himself anticipating her quiet smile, the way her eyes would light up when he brought in a fresh catch from the river or shared a story about Dusty. He saw the fleeting glimpses of humor that would shine through her pain, a defiant spark that refused to be extinguished. It was in these small, unscripted moments that he found himself inexplicably drawn to her. The concern for her well-being extended beyond the physical. Caleb began to adjust his own routine to accommodate her. He rode into town more frequently, not just for supplies, but to gather information, to listen to the whispers on the wind. Harmony Creek was a small, close-knit community, but news traveled fast, and he needed to know if any shadows from Sophie's past were approaching. He kept his rifle closer at hand, his senses heightened, his vigilance constant. He was no longer just protecting his solitude, he was protecting her. One evening, as the first flakes of snow began to fall, dusting the cabin roof with white, Sophie found him sitting by the fire, sharpening his hunting knife. The rhythmic rasp of steel on stone was the only sound in the quiet room. "Caleb," she began, her voice soft, "I need to tell you about him. About Silas." He looked up, his dark eyes unwavering. "You don't have to. I know enough." "No," she insisted, her voice gaining strength. "You do. You need to know what kind of man he is. He's cruel, Caleb. Not just to me, to everyone around him. He's powerful too. He has connections. He owns most of the land east of the mountains, and he has men who do his bidding without question." She spoke of Silas Reynolds, a man of ruthless ambition and cold cruelty, who controlled a vast ranching empire through intimidation and fear. He was possessive, demanding, and utterly without remorse. She described a life of quiet terror, of walking on eggshells, of enduring constant humiliation and physical abuse. She had tried to leave before, but he had always found her, dragging her back with threats against her family, against anyone who dared to help her. This last escape, spurred by his escalating violence and her desperate fear for the life within her, had been her final, desperate gamble. "He believes I'm his property," Sophie said, her voice trembling slightly. "And he won't stop until he finds me. He will kill me, Caleb. He will kill our baby." The last words, spoken with such raw, primal fear, hit Caleb like a physical blow. His hand tightened on the knife. "He won't touch you," Caleb vowed, his voice low and fierce, a rumbling promise that resonated with the ancient protectiveness of the land itself. "Not while you're here. Not while I'm alive." Sophie's storm-colored eyes met his, and in their depths, he saw not just fear, but a flicker of hope, a profound trust that touched a part of his soul he thought long dormant. She had laid bare her deepest fears, her vulnerability, and he had met it with an unwavering promise. It was a silent pact between them, a bond forging in the crucible of shared danger. He knew now, with absolute certainty, that his offering of shelter was no longer just an act of kindness. It was a declaration. He was not just protecting a transient guest. He was protecting a woman who, in her quiet strength and gentle spirit, had begun to fill the vast empty spaces in his own heart. The idea of Silas Reynolds, of any man, laying a cruel hand on her unborn child, ignited a cold fury within him. He would burn the world down before he let that happen. Over the next few weeks, the snow fell heavier, blanketing the plains in a pristine white. It served as a natural barrier, temporarily hindering anyone trying to track Sophie. Caleb used this respite to strengthen his defenses. He reinforced the cabin, set up tripwires around the perimeter, and meticulously cleaned and loaded every firearm he possessed. He also rode out frequently, scouting the trails, looking for any sign of approaching danger. He also made discreet inquiries in Harmony Creek, speaking with old friends, men he trusted implicitly. He spoke in vague terms, hinting at a dangerous situation, at a woman in need of protection, without revealing Sophie's identity. The community, sensing his unusual gravity, offered their quiet support, promising vigilance. One evening, as Caleb was checking the traps he had set for rabbits, he found himself thinking not just of the immediate danger, but of a future beyond the shadows. He pictured Sophie, her eyes no longer shadowed by fear, holding her child, their child, in her arms. He imagined laughter filling his cabin, the quiet joy of a family built on trust and unwavering love. He, who had always envisioned a solitary life, now saw a future intertwined with hers, a future worth fighting for, worth risking everything for. He returned to the cabin, the scent of wood smoke a welcoming embrace. Sophie was humming softly, rocking gently in his old armchair, a hand resting protectively on her swelling belly. Her presence was a comforting warmth that permeated every corner of his home, chasing away the lingering chill of his past. "Caleb," she said, looking up, a soft smile on her lips. "The stew is ready." He sat opposite her, his gaze holding hers. The silence stretched between them, not awkward, but filled with a profound understanding. He saw the resilience in her eyes, the gentle strength that belied her fragile form. He saw the woman he was falling for, the woman he would protect with his last breath. He had offered her shelter, but she had offered him something far more profound, a home for his heart, a future he now fiercely desired. And he knew, with chilling certainty, that Silas Reynolds would come. But when he did, he wouldn't just be facing a half-broken cowboy. He would be facing a man who had finally found something worth fighting for, something he would never let go of. The harsh grip of winter tightened its hold on the high plains, blanketing the land in a thick, unforgiving layer of snow. For Caleb, this offered a deceptive peace. The deep drifts and icy trails made travel difficult, buying them precious time. He used these weeks to further fortify his cabin, turning it into a veritable stronghold. He meticulously stocked provisions, repaired worn equipment, and established a series of discreet alarm systems around the perimeter of his property, relying on his intimate knowledge of the land. His vigilance was relentless, a silent shadow always watching the horizon. Sophie, though confined largely to the cabin by the severity of the weather and her advancing pregnancy, remained an unwavering source of strength. She took solace in the warmth of the fire, her fingers often busy with needle and thread, preparing tiny garments for the coming child. Her smile, though sometimes tinged with a quiet wistfulness, was a balm to Caleb's weary soul. They spoke more freely now, sharing anecdotes from their pasts, building a bridge of understanding between their two vastly different lives. He learned of her artistic inclinations, her love for stories, her dreams for a life free from fear. She, in turn, heard fragments of his solitary existence, the quiet wisdom gleaned from years of self-reliance, the hidden kindness beneath his gruff exterior. The unspoken affection between them blossomed into a deeper, undeniable love. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, but a slow, tender unfurling, nurtured in the quiet intimacy of their shared sanctuary. A shared glance across the fire, a lingering touch when hands brushed, the comfortable silence that settled between them, all spoke volumes. Caleb found himself captivated by her resilience, by the spark of defiance that shone in her storm-colored eyes, even amidst her pain. He saw not just a victim of circumstance, but a woman of immense courage, a partner he never knew he needed. He, who had vowed never to let anyone close, now found his heart irrevocably entangled with hers, a warmth he hadn't known he was missing. One evening, as a fierce blizzard raged outside, trapping them entirely within the cabin, Sophie went into labor. It was premature, brought on by the stress and physical ordeal she had endured. The unexpected onset of contractions, sharp and relentless, filled the cabin with a sudden, urgent tension. Caleb, usually unflappable, felt a jolt of panic. He was a cowboy, used to breaking horses and mending fences, not delivering babies. "Caleb!" Sophie gasped, clutching his hand, her face pale, slick with sweat. It's time." He swallowed hard, his mind racing. There was no way to get to Harmony Creek, no way to bring a doctor. They were utterly alone, isolated by the storm. He had to rely on his instincts, on the raw courage that had seen him through countless perilous situations. He moved with a quiet efficiency, remembering snippets of old wives' tales and stories he'd overheard from the women in Harmony Creek. He boiled water, tore clean sheets into strips, and knelt beside Sophie, his large hand gently stroking her forehead. He spoke to her in low, soothing tones, offering words of encouragement, his voice a steady anchor in her pain. Hours blurred into a grueling eternity. Sophie, despite her immense pain, pushed with a strength that astounded him, her spirit unwavering. Caleb, his own heart hammering against his ribs, guided her, coached her, his eyes never leaving hers, his presence an unwavering shield against the overwhelming pain. He was covered in sweat, his muscles aching, but he pushed down his own fear, focusing entirely on her, on the fragile life she was fighting to bring into the world. Then, just as the first hint of dawn began to break through the blizzard's fury, a tiny, piercing cry filled the cabin. A baby's cry, raw and beautiful. Caleb's breath caught in his throat. He looked down, and there, nestled in his trembling hands, was a tiny squalling infant, red and wrinkled, but undeniably alive. "It's a girl, Sophie," he choked out, his voice thick with emotion, tears blurring his vision. A little girl. Sophie, exhausted but radiant, looked at her daughter, a profound love shining in her eyes. "Our daughter," she whispered, her voice weak but filled with overwhelming joy. "She's perfect." He carefully cut the cord, his hands surprisingly steady, and wrapped the tiny bundle in a soft blanket. He laid her gently on Sophie's chest, and the new mother, with a sigh of utter contentment, drew her child close, her eyes closed in blissful exhaustion. In that moment, watching Sophie cradle their daughter, a profound realization washed over Caleb. This wasn't just about protecting Sophie from Silas. This was about building a future, a family, a legacy. He was a father. He was a protector, not just of a woman, but of a fragile, innocent life that was inextricably linked to his own. He was no longer just a half-broken cowboy. He was a man made whole by love, by responsibility, by the profound miracle he held in his arms. The storm outside raged on, but inside the cabin, a new warmth had settled, a palpable sense of hope and belonging. The cries of their newborn daughter filled the small space, a symphony of new life. the defiant testament to their love, a promise of a future worth fighting for. Caleb knew that Silas Reynolds would still come. But now, he wasn't just fighting for Sophie. He was fighting for his daughter, for the very essence of the family they had painstakingly built, a family he would protect with every fiber of his being, to his last breath. The blizzard eventually relented, leaving behind a pristine, untouched landscape of snow that stretched endlessly under a vast, silent sky. But the peace it brought was fleeting. With the easing of the weather, Caleb knew, came the renewed threat of Silas Reynolds. The birth of their daughter, Clara, had intensified Caleb's resolve, cementing his commitment to Sophie and their newly formed family. He was a father now, his protective instincts sharpened to a razor's edge. Sophie, though still recovering from the arduous labor, radiated a quiet strength that astonished him. Her focus was entirely on Clara, her storm-colored eyes softening with an exquisite tenderness whenever she gazed at their daughter. The cabin, once a solitary haven, now buzzed with the gentle rhythms of new parenthood, the soft cooing of the baby, the hushed whispers of lullabies, the quiet domesticity that filled Caleb's once empty spaces with warmth and purpose. He found himself drawn to Clara's tiny form, her miniature hands clutching his finger, a profound sense of wonder and belonging swelling in his chest. Caleb, ever vigilant, began to adjust his routine. He rode out frequently, no longer just scouting, but actively patrolling the outlying areas of his ranch, looking for any signs of intrusion. He made his presence known in Harmony Creek, speaking casually with old friends, discreetly inquiring about any unusual travelers or rumors. He knew Silas was resourceful, ruthless, and relentless. He would leave no stone unturned in his search for Sophie, and, now, his heir. One afternoon, a rider, shrouded in a heavy cloak, galloped into Harmony Creek. It wasn't one of Silas's men, but a trusted contact from a neighboring town, Lucas, a man who had heard Caleb's veiled inquiries. Lucas was grim-faced, his news chilling. "Caleb," Lucas began, his voice low. "Word has reached me. Silas Reynolds has put out a hefty bounty for Sophie, dead or alive, and he's got men, a whole posse of them, out looking for her. They're asking questions in every town, showing her description. He's determined, Caleb." Caleb's jaw tightened. "How many men? What kind?" "Hard men, Caleb. Mercenaries. And led by a man named Slade. He's known for his brutality, a real snake. He won't stop until he gets his bounty." Lucas paused, his gaze significant. "They're getting closer. Seen him masking in Dusty Gulch yesterday. That's only a day's ride from here." The news, though expected, sent a cold wave through Caleb. Silas wasn't just searching anymore. He was escalating, deploying professional hunters. He was no longer just dealing with a vengeful husband, but with a calculated, well-funded operation. He knew Slade's reputation. The man was a ghost, leaving nothing but destruction in his wake. He returned to the cabin, his mind a whirlwind of grim calculations. He couldn't hide Sophie and Clara indefinitely. The winter wouldn't last forever, and even then, Silas had proven he could overcome natural obstacles. He had to be proactive. He had to draw Slade away from Harmony Creek, away from his family. He sat Sophie down, his face reflecting the gravity of the situation. "Sophie, Silas has put a bounty on you. He sent men, led by a man named Slade. They're getting close. I have to draw them away." Sophie's face paled, her hand instinctively going to Clara, who was sleeping peacefully in her cradle. "No, Caleb. You can't. It's too dangerous." "I have to," Caleb insisted, his voice firm, his gaze unwavering. "If they find you here, the entire town to be put at risk, and I won't let them touch Clara. I'll lead them away, draw them out into the wilderness. I know these plains better than any man. I can lose them. But what if you don't?" Sophie whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "What if he catches you?" He reached out, cupping her cheek, his thumb gently caressing the fading bruise on her jaw. "I won't. I promise you. I'm not the kind of man to give up. Not when I have something worth fighting for." He leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "You stay here. Caleb will look after you. Stay hidden. Don't let anyone in." Their eyes met. A silent exchange of fear, love, and unwavering resolve. Sophie, though terrified, nodded, recognizing the grim necessity of his plan. She knew Caleb's strength, his resourcefulness. She knew he was their only hope. He prepared swiftly, gathering supplies for a long journey, sharpening his hunting knife, checking his rifle and ammunition. He packed a small satchel of Sophie's belongings, just in case, a contingency he hoped never to enact. He left her with enough food and fuel to last for weeks, instructed her on the defensive measures he had put in place, and gave her a loaded revolver, teaching her how to use it with grim urgency. The farewell was brief, a silent embrace, filled with unspoken fears and profound promises. He held Clara for a long moment, the tiny weight of her fragile body a powerful anchor to his purpose. He pressed a kiss to Sophie's lips, a desperate plea for her to remain safe, for their future to hold. He rode out before dawn, the air still crisp and cold, the stars still bright in the inky sky. He rode Dusty hard, leaving a clear trail at first, leading them away from Harmony Creek, then gradually veiling his tracks, using his knowledge of the land to disappear into the vast, unforgiving wilderness. He was a phantom now, a ghost leading other ghosts on a perilous chase. He rode for days, pushing himself and Dusty to their limits, always keeping an eye on his back trail. He saw signs of their pursuit: broken branches, disturbed earth, the faint scent of cigar smoke. Slade and his men were relentless, skilled trackers, but Caleb was faster, more cunning, driven by a fierce, protective love. He moved like a shadow, weaving through canyons, crossing icy rivers, climbing treacherous ridges. He knew the land intimately. Every hidden cave, every forgotten trail, every place where a man could disappear. He finally reached a remote, desolate region known as the Devil's Backbone, a treacherous stretch of mountains riddled with narrow passes and steep cliffs. This was where he would make his stand, where he would lose them, or die trying. He set up a series of traps, simple but effective snares, designed to slow and disorient. He climbed to a high vantage point, overlooking the winding pass below, his rifle at the ready. As the sun began to set, casting long, eerie shadows across the rugged landscape, he saw them. Slade and his men, a dark stain against the pristine snow, slowly making their way through the pass, their forms silhouetted against the dying light. They were methodical, ruthless, but they were also predictable. They were following the trail, confident in their numbers. Caleb took a deep breath, the cold air burning his lungs. His heart hammered in his chest, a primal drumbeat of anticipation and dread. He was a half-broken cowboy who had found his reason to live. A man who had found love and purpose in the quiet strength of a woman and the fragile innocence of a child. He was no longer running from his past. He was using every ounce of it, every hard-won skill, to protect his future. The battle was imminent, and he was ready. He would fight until his last breath, knowing that back in his cabin, a small family, his family, awaited his return. A future worth any sacrifice. The biting wind, a relentless sculptor of the treacherous Devil's Backbone, howled around Caleb's position, carrying with it the scent of pine and impending confrontation. He lay hidden on a high rocky outcrop, his rifle cold and steady in his hands, his dark eyes scanning the winding pass below. Slade and his men, a dozen grim figures, moved with a predatory silence, their forms stark against the snow, their breath pluming in the frigid air. They were closer now, their pursuit relentless, their intent lethal. Caleb's heart hammered a slow, heavy rhythm against his ribs, but his mind was clear, his senses razor-sharp. He had led them here, into this desolate, unforgiving landscape he knew intimately. This was his territory, a place where a man could disappear or be utterly destroyed. He was no longer just running. He was setting a stage for a desperate, final act. He watched as Slade, a hulking man with a scarred face and cold reptilian eyes, dismounted, signaling his men to fan out. They were cautious, sensing the silent trap, but their arrogance, their certainty of catching their quarry, pushed them forward. Caleb allowed them to draw deeper into the narrow pass, their forms now clearly visible in the fading light. He counted them, assessed their positions, calculated their movements. Then, with a deep breath, he acted. His first shot echoed deafeningly in the canyon, striking the lead horse, sending it rearing and neighing in terror. The sudden chaos disrupted their formation, giving Caleb precious seconds. He shifted his aim, firing another shot that took down a man attempting to flank him. Chaos erupted. Slade's men scattered, seeking cover amidst the rocky terrain, their own rifles barking in response. Bullets whizzed past Caleb's head, chipping stone near his face. He moved with a fluid grace, bored of years of evasion and skirmish, rolling from one cover to another, a phantom in the gathering dusk. He fired sparingly, making each shot count, his aim deadly accurate. He activated the traps he had set, tripwires that sent cascades of loose rocks tumbling down narrow gullies, disorienting and slowing the pursuers. He had meticulously placed small caches of ammunition and water along his planned escape route, ensuring he would not run out of resources. His intimate knowledge of the canyon, its hidden caves, its treacherous ledges, became his greatest weapon. Slade, enraged by the unexpected resistance, roared commands at his men, his voice thick with frustration. He was a hunter, used to easy prey, and Caleb's defiance clearly infuriated him. The fight stretched into the twilight hours, a desperate dance of death amidst the unforgiving landscape. Caleb fought with a primal ferocity, fueled by the images of Sophie and Clara in his mind. He would not fail them. He would not let these men reach his family. He managed to separate Slade from his men, leading the hulking enforcer into a particularly treacherous section of the canyon, a narrow, winding path above a sheer drop. He moved silently, a shadow within the shadows, using the fading light and the unpredictable terrain to his advantage. Slade, breathing heavily, his face contorted with rage, finally cornered Caleb on a small, isolated ledge. "You're a dead man, Cowboy," he snarled, raising his rifle. "No one outruns Silas Reynolds." "I'm not running anymore," Caleb retorted, his voice low and steady. "And I'm not afraid of you." He moved first, feinting left, drawing Slade's aim, then dropping to one knee and firing his revolver. The bullet struck Slade's shoulder, a sickening thud, but the big man barely flinched, his adrenaline masking the pain. He charged, rifle turning into a club, swinging wildly. Caleb dodged, the rifle butt whistling past his ear. He knew he couldn't beat Slade in a prolonged brawl. He needed to use his wits, his knowledge of the environment. He pulled his knife, its blade glinting wickedly in the faint moonlight. They grappled, a desperate struggle on the narrow ledge. Slade was powerful, driven by blind fury, but Caleb was agile, precise, his years of fighting for survival making him a formidable opponent. He aimed for weaknesses, for pressure points, for anything that would give him an advantage. With a surge of strength, Caleb broke free from Slade's grip, stepping back to the very edge of the cliff. Slade lunged, his eyes burning with vengeful hatred. But Caleb anticipated the move. As Slade lunged, Caleb ducked, and with a powerful shove, sent the bigger man sprawling forward, over the edge of the cliff. Slade screamed, a raw, terrified sound that echoed briefly in the canyon before abruptly cutting off. A sickening thud from far below signaled his final demise. Caleb stood there, breathing heavily, his body aching, his muscles trembling. He looked down into the black abyss, a grim satisfaction settling over him. One less threat. But he knew Silas would send others. This was just the beginning of a prolonged, dangerous struggle. He made his way back to where he had left his horse, Dusty, the mare waiting patiently, her breath misting in the cold air. His other trackers, after hearing the explosion and the prolonged gunfire, had scattered, convinced he had been killed or that the area was too dangerous. He was alone again, but with a profound sense of grim accomplishment. He had protected his family, at least for now. He rode out of the Devil's Backbone under the silent gaze of the moon, leaving the dead behind him. He pushed Dusty hard, his mind already planning his next move, how to further protect Sophie and Clara, how to prepare Harmony Creek for the inevitable escalation from Silas Reynolds. He was no longer just running. He was actively dismantling the forces that threatened his home. He rode back into Harmony Creek days later, exhausted but resolute. The town, alerted by the sounds of the distant confrontation, had been on edge, waiting for news. When they saw Caleb, grim-faced but alive, a collective sigh of relief swept through the community. He found Sophie in the cabin, clutching Clara, her face pale with worry. When she saw him, safe and relatively unharmed, she rushed into his arms, tears streaming down her face. He held her close, feeling the warmth of her body, the soft weight of Clara nestled between them. "You came back," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "You came back to us. Always," Caleb promised, his voice rough with emotion. "Always for you, for our daughter, for our home." He looked at Clara, sleeping peacefully in her arms, then back at Sophie's storm-colored eyes, filled with profound love and unwavering trust. He had faced down evil, walked through fire, and battled death. But holding them in his arms, feeling the quiet pulse of their lives, he knew that the greatest battle he had ever fought was the one for their future, a future he would protect with every fiber of his being. The immediate threat had passed, but he knew Silas would return. And Caleb Danner, the half-broken cowboy who had found his forever, would be ready. The brief respite that followed Slade's defeat was a fragile calm before an even greater storm. Caleb knew Silas Reynolds would not be deterred by the loss of a single enforcer, no matter how brutal. Silas was a man of immense resources and an unyielding will, driven by a possessive rage that bordered on madness. The game had escalated, and Caleb understood that the next move would be far more calculated, far more devastating. Harmony Creek, having witnessed Caleb's grim determination and the lengths he would go to protect his own, rallied around him with unwavering support. The townsfolk, led by Sheriff Brody, solidified their defenses. They organized patrols, fortified key locations, and established a robust communication network. Caleb, though still the primary protector, was no longer fighting alone. He was part of a unified community, a bulwark against the encroaching darkness. Sophie, though constantly worried for Caleb's safety, refused to be a burden. Her strength, a quiet but potent force, radiated outward, inspiring those around her. She focused on their daughter, Clara, her tiny hands and gurgling laughs, a constant reminder of the precious future they were fighting for. But she also immersed herself in the community, tending to the sick, offering comfort, her compassion a binding force. Caleb observed her with endless admiration. She was not just resilient, but truly kind, a beacon of hope in the gathering shadows. One frigid morning, a lone rider approached Harmony Creek, not with the swiftness of an enforcer, but with a calculated slowness that hinted at a different kind of threat. It was a man named Reverend Josiah Albright, a charismatic preacher known for his fiery sermons and his ability to sway public opinion. He came with a wagon full of medical supplies, ostensibly to offer aid to a community that had recently faced a bandit attack, his words carefully chosen to mask the truth of Slade's demise. Caleb watched him from the shadows, his instincts screaming caution. Albright was too smooth, too polished, his eyes holding a calculating glint that belied his pious demeanor. He was Silas's new weapon, a wolf in sheep's clothing, sent to dismantle Harmony Creek from within, to sow discord and fear, to turn the community against Caleb and, by extension, Sophie. Albright set up his tent in the town square, offering sermons that subtly twisted truth, weaving tales of sinful women who brought danger to innocent communities, of vengeful spirits that followed those who defied our natural order. He never named Sophie, but his words, laced with insinuation, slowly began to chip away at the unwavering trust the townsfolk had placed in Caleb. He played on their fears, on their ingrained prejudices, on the desire for simple peace. Whispers began to circulate. Some townspeople, swayed by Albright's silver tongue and his seemingly benevolent demeanor, started to question Caleb's motives, his past, and his presence. Had he truly saved them, or had he simply brought more trouble to their door? A subtle tension began to permeate Harmony Creek, a hairline fracture appearing in the solid wall of their unity. Caleb felt the shift, the insidious erosion of trust. He knew this was Silas's true cunning, a far more dangerous tactic than brute force. He couldn't fight words with bullets. He had to expose Albright for what he was, to reveal the insidious poison he was spreading. He spoke with Sheriff Brody, who, though still wary, was also discerning. Brody had seen enough of Silas's machinations to know this was part of a larger, more sinister plan. Lily, with her keen understanding of human nature, also sensed the duplicity in Albright's words, the subtle manipulation disguised as divine pronouncements. "He's twisting their faith, Caleb," Lily observed, her voice tight with concern. "Making them believe that you're the problem, that you brought this trouble upon us." Caleb knew he had to act. He had to uncover Albright's true connection to Silas, to find tangible proof of his deceit. He couldn't afford to let doubt fester in the heart of Harmony Creek. He couldn't let the town he had fought for, the home he had found, be dismantled from within. He spent his nights observing Albright, shadowing his movements, listening to his hushed conversations, looking for any sign of a weakness, any crack in his carefully constructed facade. He relied on his years of experience living on the fringes, his ability to blend into the shadows, to observe unseen. He discovered Albright was secretly meeting with a small group of disgruntled ranchers, men who had previously clashed with Caleb over water rights or grazing land. Albright promised them influence, favorable deals, and a return to the old ways if they helped him remove Caleb from the picture, effectively driving him out of Harmony Creek. It was a classic divide-and-conquer strategy, fueled by old grievances and a lust for power. Then, one stormy night, as the wind howled and rain lashed against the cabin, Caleb saw Albright make a furtive journey to the outskirts of town, to a derelict shack known to be a temporary hiding place for drifters. He saw Albright exchange a thick wad of money with a shadowy figure, then receive a sealed package. The figure, a gruff, anonymous man, was clearly one of Silas's low-level informants. Caleb returned to the cabin, his mind ablaze. He had the proof he needed. The package, he suspected, contained letters or documents from Silas, further instructions for Albright's insidious mission. But how to get it? He confided in Sophie, laying out his plan. "I need to get that package, Sophie. It's the proof we need to expose him. But I'll have to do it alone. It's too risky." Sophie's storm-colored eyes held a familiar fear, but also an unwavering resolve. "Be careful, Caleb," she whispered, her hand gently touching his arm. "Don't let him corner you. We need you." He kissed her, a brief, desperate promise against her lips, then slipped out into the stormy night. He moved like a ghost, his knowledge of the town's hidden alleys and backways serving him well. He approached the derelict shack, his senses heightened, his heart hammering in his chest. He found Albright inside, alone, carefully reading the contents of the package by the dim light of a lantern. The letters, from Silas himself, detailed the plan to discredit Caleb, to destabilize Harmony Creek, and to pave the way for Silas to reclaim Sophie and their child. They also revealed Albright's past, a history of extortion and manipulation under the guise of religious fervor, a shadowy life he had carefully concealed. Caleb burst in, his presence sudden and imposing. Albright gasped, his face paling as he looked up, startled. He tried to hide the letters, but Caleb was too quick, his hand snatching them from the table. "So, Reverend," Caleb said, his voice cold, devoid of emotion, "it seems you're not as pious as you pretend to be." Albright recovered quickly, his face contorted into a snarl. He lunged for Caleb, a small concealed knife glinting in his hand. He was not just a preacher. He was a man of violence, capable of brutal deception. Caleb sidestepped, his movements fluid, years of fighting for survival kicking in. He disarmed Albright with a swift, practiced motion, pinning him against the wall, the knife clattering to the floor. "These letters," Caleb said, holding them up, his gaze piercing Albright's desperate eyes. "They're enough to expose you. Enough to show Harmony Creek who you truly are. A fraud, a liar, a man working for a monster." Albright struggled, but Caleb held him firm. "You won't get away with this, Danner," Albright snarled, his voice a venomous hiss. "Silas Reynolds has infinite reach. He'll find you. He'll find her. He'll find your child." Caleb's jaw tightened. The threat against Sophie and Clara ignited a cold fury within him. "He won't touch them. Caleb vowed, his voice low and dangerous. "And you, Reverend, will be out of Harmony Creek by morning, or I'll make sure everyone sees these letters. And then your holy facade will crumble, and you'll answer for your sins, not just to Silas, but to the law." But he released Albright, stepping back, allowing the disgraced preacher to scramble away. Albright, seeing the unwavering resolve in Caleb's eyes, the undeniable proof in his hand, knew he was beaten. He would slink away. His mission failed, his true nature exposed. Caleb returned to the cabin, drenched and weary, but with a grim satisfaction. He showed Sophie the letters, and her storm-colored eyes widened as she read the damning evidence of Albright's treachery. The next morning, Sheriff Brody, armed with Albright's letters, confronted the preacher in the town square, exposing his fraudulent past and his sinister alliance with Silas. The townsfolk, initially swayed by Albright's charisma, listened with growing horror. Their trust in Caleb reaffirmed, their resolve to protect their community strengthened. Albright, stripped of his authority and exposed for the charlatan he was, slunk out of Harmony Creek, his mission a catastrophic failure. The unity of Harmony Creek, once threatened, had been restored, stronger than ever. But Caleb knew this was only a temporary reprieve. Silas Reynolds would not give up. He would send more men, more schemes, more insidious threats. The war for Sophie's freedom, for Clara's future, and for their home, was far from over. But Caleb Danner, the half-broken cowboy who had found his forever, stood ready, his hand firmly clasped in Sophie's, their love an unyielding fortress against the encroaching darkness. He would protect them, not just with his strength, but with his unwavering heart. The departure of Reverend Albright, disgraced and exposed, brought a renewed sense of unity to Harmony Creek. The town, having faced deception from within, now stood even stronger, their trust in Caleb Danner unwavering. The incident served as a stark reminder of Silas Reynolds's insidious reach, proving he would employ any means, however manipulative, to achieve his vengeful goals. Caleb, though victorious in this skirmish, knew the true battle still lay ahead. Silas would come, not with a pretense of religion, but with overwhelming force. Caleb intensified his preparations. He coordinated with Sheriff Brody and the town elders, establishing a comprehensive defense plan for Harmony Creek. They fortified key buildings, stockpiled ammunition and food, and organized a disciplined militia, training every able-bodied man and woman in defensive tactics. The ranch, now the heart of their home, became a central point of their defense, its sturdy cabin and barns serving as strategic strongholds. Sophie, despite the ever-present threat, found her own ways to contribute. She became the linchpin of their internal network, organizing supplies, tending to the town's wounded, and offering quiet reassurance to anxious mothers and children. Her resilience was a calming presence, her storm-colored eyes radiating a quiet courage that inspired many. Their daughter, Clara, now a few months old, brought a constant sense of joy and purpose to their days, her innocent gurgles a powerful reminder of the future they were fighting to secure. Caleb's love for Sophie deepened with each passing day, forged in the crucible of shared danger. He saw her unwavering spirit, her fierce protectiveness over Clara, her kindness, even in the face of fear. He found himself drawn to her strength, to the profound empathy she extended to all. The quiet moments they shared, stolen amidst the tension of preparation, became precious anchors in the impending storm. A shared meal by the fire, a whispered word of encouragement, a tender touch that conveyed more than any grand declaration. He had come to Harmony Creek, a man who had lost too much, but Sophie had shown him how to love, how to hope, how to live fully, even amidst the shadows. One cold, windswept afternoon, a chilling report reached them. A large, heavily armed force, estimated at over 50 men, had been seen crossing the Red River, heading west. They were too numerous for bandits, too organized for casual outlaws. Silas Reynolds was coming, not just for Sophie, but to raise Harmony Creek, to leave nothing but ruin in his wake. The news spread like wildfire through the town, replacing the cautious optimism with a grim determination. There was no room for fear now, only for courage. Caleb rallied the townsfolk, his voice calm and steady, outlining their defensive strategy. "They're coming for us," Caleb declared, his voice resonating with authority. "But we will stand together, every man, woman, and child. Harmony Creek is our home. We will defend it." He stationed the women and children in the fortified schoolhouse, a sturdy stone building with thick walls and narrow windows. The men took up their positions, concealed within the buildings, along the rooftops, and within the natural defenses of the surrounding terrain. Sheriff Brody led one flank. Caleb commanded the other, his eyes scanning the horizon, his heart a steady drum of readiness. As the sun began to dip below the western horizon, casting long, ominous shadows, they saw them. A cloud of dust on the horizon, growing larger, closer, then the terrifying sight of a veritable army of riders, armed to the teeth, led by a figure on a magnificent black stallion, Silas Reynolds. His cruel face, shadowed by his wide-brimmed hat, was a mask of cold fury, his eyes fixed on Harmony Creek, on the town that dared to defy him. Silas rode to the edge of town, his voice booming across the silent, tense street. "Harmony Creek, surrender the woman, Sophie Reynolds, and the child born of her. Give her to me, and I will spare your town. Defy me, and I will burn this place to the ground, and every soul within it." Caleb stepped out from behind the general store, his figure stark against the dying light, his rifle held ready. "She's not going anywhere, Silas." Caleb's voice boomed back, clear and resolute. "And neither is Harmony Creek. This is our home, and we will defend it with our lives." Silas's face contorted into a snarl of pure rage. "Then you will all die," he roared, drawing his pistol and firing a shot into the air, a signal to his men. "Attack!" The battle began. Silas's men charged, a wave of brutal force, their yells echoing through the silent town. Harmony Creek responded with a disciplined volley of rifle fire, forcing the attackers to seek cover, disorienting their charge. Caleb moved like a shadow, leading his flank, his aim deadly accurate, taking down attackers with ruthless efficiency. Sheriff Brody, despite his age, fought with the ferocity of a grizzled bear, defending his town with unwavering courage. The fight was brutal, a chaotic exchange of gunfire, desperate charges, and desperate defenses. Silas's men, though numerous, were disorganized by the town's unexpected resistance, their confidence shaken. They expected an easy victory, but they found a community united, fighting for everything they held dear. Caleb found himself facing down a group of heavily armed men, his rifle blazing, his movements fluid and precise. He fought with a singular focus, his mind filled with the image of Sophie and Clara, safe in the schoolhouse. He would not let these men past him. Suddenly, a figure broke through the chaos, riding directly towards the schoolhouse. It was a powerfully built man, a notorious enforcer known as the Butcher, Silas's most brutal lieutenant. His face was a mask of grim determination, his eyes fixed on the schoolhouse, clearly aiming to seize Sophie and Clara. "Now!" Caleb roared, his heart seizing with terror. He knew he had to stop him. He couldn't let him reach the schoolhouse. He broke free from his immediate engagement, running across the open ground, directly into the line of fire, his rifle blazing, forcing the Butcher to momentarily falter. He aimed for the man's horse, bringing it down, sending the Butcher sprawling to the ground. The Butcher, enraged, scrambled to his feet, drawing a large Bowie knife, his eyes burning with murderous intent. He charged Caleb, a primal roar tearing from his throat. Caleb met him, his own knife drawn, his movements fueled by a desperate, protective fury. They clashed, a brutal hand-to-hand struggle, their knives flashing in the dimming light. The Butcher was larger, stronger, but Caleb was quicker, more experienced in close-quarters combat, his years of survival lessons kicking in. He parried, dodged, and struck with ruthless precision, aiming for vital points, for anything that would bring the larger man down. He saw an opening, a momentary lapse in the Butcher's defense. With a surge of strength, Caleb plunged his knife deep into the Butcher's side, silencing his roar. The Butcher gasped, his eyes widening in shock and pain, before he collapsed, his massive frame hitting the dusty ground with a sickening thud. Caleb stood over him, breathing heavily, his own body aching, but triumphant. He looked up, his gaze sweeping over the ongoing battle. Silas's forces were faltering, their numbers dwindling, their morale shattered by the ferocity of Harmony Creek's resistance. Silas, witnessing the fall of his most trusted enforcer, seeing his men routed, finally broke. His face, contorted with rage and disbelief, slowly shifted to despair. He had underestimated Harmony Creek. He had underestimated Caleb Danner. "Retreat!" Silas roared, his voice hoarse, filled with impotent fury. "Retreat! We'll be back!" His remaining men, demoralized and broken, scrambled to retreat, galloping away into the gathering darkness, leaving behind a trail of dead and wounded. Silas, with a final, vengeful glare at Harmony Creek, turned his black stallion and galloped away, disappearing into the night, a defeated, broken man. The battle was over. Harmony Creek had won. The townsfolk slowly emerged from their positions, their faces bruised and weary, but filled with triumph and relief. Cheers erupted, mingling with sighs of exhaustion, as they embraced each other, their unity stronger than ever. Caleb, his body aching, made his way to the schoolhouse. Sophie rushed out. Clara clutched to her chest, tears streaming down her face. She threw herself into his arms, holding him tight, her body trembling with relief. "You saved us," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "You saved all of us. You saved our home." He held her, the quiet weight of Clara's sleeping form between them, feeling the warmth of their bodies, the familiar scent of lavender and baby. He had come to Harmony Creek a half-broken cowboy, looking for fence work. He had found a war widow, running from a cruel husband, and he had offered her shelter. He had fallen for her strength, her kindness, and the way she smiled through pain. He had realized he'd burn this town to the ground before he'd let her lose it all. And now, holding Sophie and Clara, standing on the land he had fought for, surrounded by the community he had adopted, he knew, with a profound certainty, that he had found more than just a home. He had found his forever. He was whole, no longer half-broken, his silent bond with Sophie, a testament to the enduring power of love that had brought him home and kept him there. The dust settled over Harmony Creek, not just the physical remnants of the recent battle, but the turbulent dust of fear and uncertainty. The victory against Silas Reynolds and his forces was hard-won, etched into the collective memory of the townsfolk. The sight of Silas retreating, his army broken, instilled a deep sense of security and pride. Harmony Creek had proven its resilience, its unity, and its unwavering resolve to defend its home and its people. In the aftermath, the community rallied with a newfound vigor. The wounded were tended to with meticulous care, homes were repaired, and the fortifications, though no longer under immediate threat, were maintained as a permanent reminder of their shared struggle and victory. The bond forged in the crucible of battle had transformed Harmony Creek from a collection of scattered homesteads into a true bastion of communal strength and unwavering solidarity. Caleb Danner, though weary from the prolonged conflict, felt a profound sense of peace settle deep within him. He was no longer a man defined by flight or the shadows of his past. He was a protector, a husband, a father, and an integral part of the vibrant community he had chosen to embrace. His hands, once calloused from solitary labor, now found solace in the tender touch of Sophie's hand, the small embrace of Clara, and the firm handshake of her grateful townsman. Sophie, radiating a quiet strength that had bloomed fully in the face of adversity, blossomed even further in the safety of their newfound peace. The fear that had once shadowed her eyes gradually receded, replaced by a radiant joy that illuminated her features. She immersed herself in the rebuilding efforts, her compassion and practical skills a soothing balm to the still recovering community. Her bond with Caleb, forged in the crucible of shared danger and sealed by the miracle of Clara's birth, was an unbreakable force, a quiet understanding that transcended words. Their daughter, Clara, a beacon of innocent joy, grew stronger with each passing day, her bright eyes reflecting the love and security that now surrounded her. Her laughter, a sweet melody, filled the cabin, a constant reminder of the precious future they had fought so hard to secure. Silas Reynolds, though defeated, remained a lingering shadow in the back of Caleb's mind. He knew Silas's type. The man was a snake, capable of plotting from afar, nursing his grudges. But the immediate threat had passed, and the vastness of the plains now seemed to offer a more profound sense of security. Silas's influence had been shattered, his reputation as an unstoppable force irrevocably broken by the resilience of Harmony Creek. Word of his defeat would spread, weakening his power base and making future attacks far less likely. Years unfolded with a gentle rhythm, bringing with them a season of unprecedented peace and prosperity to Harmony Creek. The ranch flourished under Caleb's capable hand, and later, under the growing guidance of young David, a bright, eager boy from the community whom Caleb took under his wing, seeing a spark of his own younger self in the aspiring rancher. Caleb taught David not just about ranching, but about integrity, about protecting what was right, and about the deep satisfaction of honest labor. The small cabin, once a symbol of Caleb's solitary existence, became a bustling home, filled with the warmth of shared meals, whispered stories, and the joyous chaos of growing children. Caleb and Sophie, their hair now more silver than dark, would often sit on their porch swing, watching the sun set over the plains, their hands clasped, a silent symphony of enduring love. Their love story, born amidst violence and uncertainty, became a legend whispered among the generations of Harmony Creek. It was a tale of a half-broken cowboy who found healing in the strength of a bruised but unbroken woman, of a man who offered shelter and found forever. It was a testament to the fact that home wasn't just a place, but a feeling, a connection forged in the crucible of shared adversity, a bond that defied all expectations. One crisp autumn evening, as the leaves turned to fiery hues and the air held the crisp promise of winter, Caleb and Sophie sat by the fireplace, the familiar crackle of the fire a comforting presence. Clara, now a young woman, was visiting with her own children, filling the house with a joyous cacophony of laughter and playful shouts. Caleb looked at Sophie, her face serene, her eyes still holding that storm-colored depth he had first seen at his door so many years ago. "Remember that night?" he mused, his voice soft, a hint of his old gruffness tempered by years of warmth. "You appeared at my door, a ghost in the moonlight." Sophie smiled, her hand reaching for his, her fingers intertwining with his calloused ones. "I was running, Caleb. Terrified. But then you opened the door. You didn't ask questions, you just offered shelter." Her gaze met his, unwavering, filled with a profound tenderness. "And you gave me everything, a home, a family, a future I never dared to dream of." He squeezed her hand, his heart overflowing. "And you, Sophie," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You gave me a reason to stay. You made me whole. You offered me forever." He had been a man who knew what evil looked like, a solitary figure haunted by the past. But she, the bruised, barefoot, pregnant woman who had appeared at his door, had shown him the true meaning of love, of kindness, and of the unwavering strength found in vulnerability. He had promised to protect her from the man who wanted her back, dead or alive. And he had, not just with his strength, but with his unwavering heart, building a fortress of love that no enemy could breach. The fire cast long, dancing shadows on the walls of the cabin, the same walls that had once held only a lone cowboy and his silence. Now, they resonated with the echoes of laughter, the warmth of family, and the enduring promise of forever. Caleb Danner, the half-broken cowboy, was no more. He was a man made whole, his life intertwined with the woman he loved. Their story, a timeless testament to courage, resilience, and the unexpected beauty of finding home in the heart of another. His journey, once defined by solitary wandering, had found its true destination, rooted firmly in the quiet, profound embrace of a love that had truly offered him everything.